think we're ready to go live if you want to hit it, Derek. We're good?
Great. Good morning, worldwide ultra fans. Day 2 of iRunFar Live here in Olympic Valley, California. We're here at the Coffeebar in the Squaw Village with a live studio audience.
Let's get some noise.
Yes. This is so cool for me. I feel like everybody's here to see Megan and I, but I have a feeling you're here to see the man between us.
Pretty sure you're here to see the guy in between us. Yeah, if you don't know that, this is Dylan Bowman, and I'm Megan Hicks, and we're here hosting your 3 live shows from Olympic Valley and our pre-race runner interviews. So it's a great pleasure for you guys to join us both here live and online.
Yeah, and of course we're brought to you by DryMax, who's a longtime sponsor of our good friend Jim here. Also Buff and Jaybird Sports, so thank you to the sponsors who support iRunFar.
We also want to say thank you to the Coffeebar. That's where we are, right here in Olympic Valley. They've got some great food and drink specials, including an afternoon happy hour for those of you who either are racing and could use take a little pressure off, or those of you who aren't racing. We also have a store back there, the iRunFar store. We've got socks, buffs, t-shirts. We've got even free stickers, so at least take free stickers with you. Those of you who are watching online, we've got an online store. You can shop as you watch. It's iRunFar.com/store. Brand new stuff there as of yesterday morning.
Great, now to the fun stuff. The man who needs no introduction, Mr. Jim Walmsley. It's your 3rd year in a row here. You've had a couple of difficult, disappointing performances. I think generally speaking, you've been obviously one of the most talented, most accomplished runners in the world the last couple of years, a couple of Ultra Runner of the Year awards to show for it. But
you have an ITRA ranking to show for it?
Yes, you do. But you've had some struggles here at this race.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, I think the world wants to know, how do you feel coming into the race? How do you feel compared to the last couple of years? And do you feel any more pressure to get it done here and race to your potential?
So I feel really prepared for this race. I think training's gone really well overall. Relatively healthy for a race, so I'm really excited about that. And then I have the little things I think really dialed in more now than ever. I've worked really closely with Cliff to get basically a completely new nutrition plan for me going forward in this race. And then kind of got my socks and shoes completely squared away, so I'm really excited about that because I have a lot of confidence of getting the feet wet, them drying quickly, and having that confidence I think really equates to being able to concentrate a lot on your ability to notice the heat, get in the water, not be afraid to get your feet wet, get more wet at aid stations, where I think in the past I've been more hesitant about getting my feet wet and trying to keep them more dry. So that's a really big step forward for me, I think. And then as far as experience, like I haven't done as much recon on the course before this one because I feel really competent in knowing the course, knowing what's coming. I've done a lot of running, specifically in the Grand Canyon, and when you're running along North Kaibab Trail, it's really good practice just to hop in the river or creek, hop out, hop in, hop out, and so that's been really beneficial, and it kind of gets you in that mindset of like, I'm really dry, I'm really hot, hop in the creek, count to 10, hop out, get going again. So that's been really good, and been doing that with all the other guys, Eric, Tim, Jared, Cody, so it's been nice, and I think they've picked up that kind of cue of I need to get in whatever puddle's available. And then as far as pressure goes, I felt a lot of pressure last year, I would say, and basically just last year just didn't go well. I didn't get it done, and kind of made my own problems and made my own mistakes and didn't react enough. And I think with last year's race, how that went, it's almost way less pressure this year. It's not like pressure's added, it's just I can screw up my own race, or other people can, like weather or all sorts of stuff. This race has proven to be tricky for me, so it's like, we'll see.
Good.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about another 100-mile race you did do in 2017. You finished 5th at UTMB.
Yeah.
That race for you seemed to have some highs in the beginning, some lows in the middle, and then you put your stuff back together and finished, like ran really hard, like being chased, I think, to the finish. You were able to really hammer. Can you talk about, like, what were the takeaways? Like, what did you learn? Did you build confidence in 100 miles? Like, what came out of that experience?
So, I mean, probably the biggest thing is the way I was able to figure something out in the race. Maybe exactly what, I don't know, but
try enough things and
I did try something, and something did come back around, and I was able to get my legs back. I was able, you're in the mix of it right there with me. You got to go by me, and then I think you're on the same descent as Xavier and Pal, and I got all three of you guys on the same descent.
Going like 4:30 pace.
But then I hit the bottom. I hit the bottom, and I'm just like, oh, I'm tired again. So it wasn't like completely back. But it was just, it's really confidence inspiring to have that situation, find yourself in the low point, and know that sometimes it does come back. I've also been in other situations like Western States last year where the more I reflect on it, the more I can agree with myself of like, it wasn't coming back.
Yeah.
I just found myself in a really deep hole last year, and I mean, it was like throwing up for the next 12 hours after the race, after I had already dropped, and I'm trying to do things right, and I'm staying in air conditioning, this and that, and it's just, I just got to a rough point last year, and I'm not going to do that this year.
So if staying out of the hole is the goal for this year, I mean, one of the things everybody I think admires about you is your desire to kind of put on a show when you're racing and to make it exciting for people to watch. And a lot of the times it results in you breaking course records and kind of having these transcendent performances. But at 100 miles, as we've spoken about, it's kind of backfired at least a little bit. Will that sort of shift your strategy in terms of the execution of the race? Can we expect you to sprint up the mountain like you usually do, or will you? Well,
so I do want to give it like a fair effort up. I think maybe last year was a couple minutes too fast. The year before was
wait, a couple minutes to the top, or
a couple minutes too fast to the top of escarpment.
Okay.
I mean, I made up so much time by just running that from the year before. I think like it was looking at it about 20 minutes. So like I started 4 miles into the race about 20 minutes ahead of the previous year, and then my next two splits were quick. So all of a sudden it's like with the high country conditions last year, I find myself in a situation where I didn't really expect to be on a competitive course record pace, and it's like, well, now we're out of the snow, and well, let's go see. And it just ended up, it was really warm early, and I think even being really well heat acclimated, I would say regularly I'm pretty heat acclimated, just because where I'm from originally and where I live now. But I can still find myself in trouble in the heat. It doesn't make you Superman in the heat.
Oh darn.
But yeah, we found that out. But yeah.
So what does that, what is the idea of wanting to give it a fair effort but stay out of the hole? What does that like literally mean in this case? What do you think you're
I don't want to walk. I don't want to walk the whole hill up.
Yeah.
Like to start up, but I think giving it a fair effort puts me a couple minutes, just a couple miles into the race, ahead of probably where I want to be split-wise. So I would expect my first split to be maybe a couple minutes quick, but really that would be running the right pace from the top to, I think, Red Star Ridge or so.
Yeah.
So I would expect the first one to be maybe a little quick, but then I have pretty conservative splits, because it's interesting with dynamics of the other racers this year, specifically like Francois. Like I think if you look at his strengths, it kind of sucks because his strengths. In his shoes, his strengths are in the beginning of the course, I think, And I think there's a lot more pressure in general on him of like, are you going to play to your strengths and run well in the beginning and try to get away a bit by the time it's runnable? Because you look at Flo from Germany, Chris Brown, Tim Frericks, myself, obviously Cody and Eric, so we'll just throw the whole crew in there.
Get a couple of names.
Like, yeah, but we got some good running legs, I think, and even comparatively to Francois. So, and it's not a 25-hour race. It's a
how many
15.
minute race is it going to be?
We'll call it about a 15-hour race, because I think weather considered too. I mean, it's going to be a really hot year. It's always a really hot year, but this year specifically is going to be right up there. But there's been low 15-hour runs by really good runners in the past in these sort of conditions.
Yeah, I sort of see it similar to 2013,
Yeah.
the second year that Tim Olson won, and he ran, I think, 15 hours, 15 minutes that year. So I think that's, you know, a solid, fair
indicative.
time.
And you also have Rob Carr that year that also ran similar splits. So yeah, I've gone back and looked at a lot of that in some of the hot weather years. But
cool. So just talking about your prep really quick. So this year you've raced a little bit less. You've done a couple shorter races. The only ultra you've done is Lake Sonoma, where you obviously destroyed it again.
Carrera Alto Seal was technically an ultra as well. It was like 44K.
Okay, so a couple of ultras.
Counting K's.
But to me, it seems like a really intelligent approach. Was that intentional? Did you intentionally race a little bit less to be more fresh?
I wanted to race Transvolcania in February, but I had an injury over winter, so that kind of delayed everything, and it just pushed everything back, and I just more or less just skipped that block and used it as a bit of rehab time. I think it's made for some more hiccups than usual in my training blocks with kind of once I get things going pretty smooth, it seems like I can, for the most part, be pretty injury free. But I think taking the time off, things aren't as hardened as usual maybe. So there's been like in this block there was 1 week that I wanted to kind of hold my mileage, right about 150 miles a week and 30,000 feet or so of climbing, and
just mellow training.
More or less. Well, I like the very last run, we just started climbing uphill, and probably a mile or two into what ended up being, I ended up just kind of forcing it on like a 18, 19 mile day. I ended up getting a bit of a quad strain, and basically the next week was off. And then it was like, I can't just hop straight back to 150, but I did take a risk and I went straight back into 110. But and basically that working out and then being able to hit a couple more weeks, I think everything was green lights go, and it's back on track. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's probably it for us. I think you've got a whole room and a whole world out there rooting for you to third time's a charm, right, Jim Walmsley?
Yeah, people have been super supportive this year, just like the last 2 years really, but this year specifically it seems like I got a lot of people in my corner, and I'm just really appreciative for that.
Great.
So it means a lot.
Well, how about a round of applause for one and only Jim. Put on a show for us this weekend again.
We'll try. Hopefully it'll be a good ending this year.
All right, we'll be back in just a minute with Caitlin Gerben. Yep.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
That was great. Thanks for coming by. Yeah.
No, it's not a lot. I think it's just like a dinner, but... Thanks. Thank you. Got it. Yeah. I got a long way to go. Last year wasn't great, so it'll be good. Feeling positive.
I want to get it, Jim.
What?
Get it this year, Jim.
I think it'll happen.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, no, I'm like super excited about it, so.
Did your whole family come with you?
I'm missing a brother and his girlfriend, but otherwise, yes.
Sweet.
They did not bring a big camera. Though, so
I was going to say, where's your mom?
right there.
There she is. Come on, get your camera out, Mom. All right, are we good to go?
Okay, and we are back here at the Coffeebar, iRunFar Live, 2 days before Western States 100, a glorious Thursday morning, joined by last year's fourth place finisher, Caitlin Gerbin. Caitlin, we've never met until just about 2 minutes ago, but yeah, I know this is also your first iRunFar interview.
Yeah.
So you kind of popped up on my radar, and I think a lot of people's radars last year here at this race. So being as it is your first iRunFar interview, can you tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from?
Sure. Yeah, so first of all, I'm really excited to be here, so thank you guys for giving me the chance, and it's also really fun to do this in like a live interview setting, so I feel like that's pretty fun.
Thanks for coming.
So yeah, I'm originally from Wisconsin, and then I moved to Seattle, Washington for graduate school, and I've been there for about almost 8 years now. So I was running a little bit kind of in college just for fun, and then started doing some casual marathon running, really non-competitive, and then got into trail and ultra running pretty much once I moved to Seattle. So yeah, it's been fun.
I read a couple of things about you online.
Okay.
One of them was that you discovered running through a college running course
Yes.
for credit.
Yep.
You got
This is a true story.
college credit to run.
Yes, and actually this is a great opportunity for me to give a shout out to that running professor, Ronnie Carta, which hopefully I'll send him this, he can watch that later. So yeah, it was a PE class that I'd heard about from other friends, and they're like, yeah, you can run this class and get, I think it was 2 credits for marathon, or no, it was marathon and distance training. But for me at that time, I thought, oh, maybe I'll run a half marathon. That was like a distance run to me. So I signed up for the course, I got in, and on the first day, Ronnie told the whole course that like, okay, to pass this class, you're gonna need to run a marathon. And I think everyone was like, oh my gosh, like, are you kidding me? So throughout that class, then we did like, I think it was like 1 day a week where we did group runs, and then another day where we were learning about like nutrition and training strategy and stuff. So that was awesome because I didn't run in high school or in college, so it was a good way to make some friends in running and have some training partners, and then learn a little bit of the foundations. That's important when you're building up distance. So I actually failed the class that first year because I got injured snowboarding and did not run a marathon. But luckily Ronnie let me in the following year to redeem myself. So yeah.
That's great.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah.
last year you raced your way in at Gorge Waterfalls, right? And then of course you're back because you finished 4th
Yeah.
last year. You've been pretty dominant in the Pacific Northwest, and you just finished 10th at the World Championships in Spain just 4 or 5 weeks ago. Does your 4th place finish from last year and your recent success like on the international stage give you confidence coming into the race, or how are you approaching it strategically this year as compared to last year?
Yeah, so I think what's like both Western States last year and then the Worlds, which was just recently, gave me the confidence that like I do deserve to be racing in the front. And I think last year coming into Western States, it was a lot of like, oh my gosh, like look at who I'm running next to. I was running next to a lot of people that I look up to in the sport, and so there's a lot of imposter syndrome of thinking like, do I deserve to be here? What am I doing? And then everyone was so nice. So that was one of the coolest things last year, was just running alongside women who are basically idols to me. So that was really cool. So I think coming into this year, I feel less pressure, less nervous. I'm just excited to go out and run because I have running in the Northwest, there's a lot of local races and a lot of people that I've met through those, and so I had all that support last year, so that was so fun to see a lot of people back home rooting for me. But I felt like coming here I didn't really know anybody, and so it's fun now this year. There's a lot more familiar faces, and I've been on the course, and I think I'm going into it just knowing that I've had quite a few good races where I've been able to, trust myself, run my own race, and then put that together to have a solid finish. And so I'm hoping I can do the same this year.
That's so cool.
So.
I want to ask you a little bit about strategically how the race went last year. Like numbers-wise, you started, decently far back in the field, like in the 15s-ish. and then you just gently moved up throughout the race, and then it looked like there were turbochargers that just turned on California Street.
Yeah.
So that's how it went numbers-wise. And then when you crossed the finish line, like, you had so much bounce as you were running around the track. I was like, that girl's got a couple intervals left in her. She'd like, how did it feel strategically and physically for you, from your side looking at it?
Yeah. So I think a few things are that last year Western States was my second 100, and so I still, I had a feeling of kind of what those later miles in the race would be like, but there's still so much unknown. I think every time it's still hard to really predict, but I know you have to know what your strengths are and try to keep that in mind as you're planning out the race. And so I know I tend to be a second half runner. And so I just, especially with the high country conditions last year, I'm like, okay, you know what, I'm going to just run by feel, try to run conservatively, but still in a place that would, at a time that would still put me in a good striking distance to make it into the top 10. And then, I'd gotten some great advice that I think a lot of people know, like the race starts at Forest Hill. So, and that was when I was picking up my pacers. So my husband, Ellie, paced me from Forest Hill to Green Gate. And I wanted to get to him able to run so that we could really have some fun. And that's where we started passing people. And then my friend Ladia, who just ran Broken Arrow last weekend, she paced me from Green Gate to the finish. And she's such a speedster, so I was like, I need to get to her being able to run, because I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if she can run slow. So like, we're gonna get to her and be able to run. So that was really fun, and it's always fun feeling, relatively speaking, stronger towards the end of the race. It's it's fun chasing people down. So
yeah, you and Jeff Browning almost had identical races looking back at last year, and that you were well outside the top 10, and then after Forest Hill sort of moved through the entire field and both finished fourth. It's kind of cool to look back and see that. But also, obviously, you mentioned the snow last year and the difficult conditions, a slow year comparatively. This year is also setting up to be one of the hotter, if not the hottest race in race history. Have you done anything specific to prepare for the elements this year that maybe you think will help you be more successful?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to get in a sauna, so it's not, luckily we've had a few hot days recently up in Seattle area, but it's generally pretty mild temperatures there, so I think I did this basically a similar thing as what I did last year, like getting in the sauna, trying to get for a few runs in the heat, although that's hard because usually it's hottest in the middle of the day, which is when I'm at work, so that's hard. So, but I feel pretty good about my heat training going in, and last year I just tried to use ice as much as possible, stay wet, so I'm going to do the same thing again this year. I think I was wet almost the whole race last year, so I think that helped. So.
Let's talk about the other women in the race. Like, you said last year that you were just like, oh, I'm really surrounded by women who I look up to. Well, like this year there's going to be women looking up to you, as that type of person. Do you have a plan for what you're going to do with the other women around you? Are you really going to try to stick to your own race the entire time? Or are you going to try to enjoy some really easy miles in the company of women? There's this cool picnic that women do at the escarpment at sunrise. Are you going to participate?
I mean, part of the thing that's so cool about running these races is that there are so many fun people to run with, so that's definitely a big part of the experience, which is why I really was excited to come back to this race this year. So no, I definitely hope to connect with some runners out on the course, but at the same time I think I want to go into this race trusting myself, trusting my fitness, and making sure that I don't get too comfortable early on. And I think last year that was, running around and I'm seeing like, oh, these are all the women who finished top 10 last year. This is great. I'm in a good place. And so, I mean, that's definitely, I still want to kind of have a little bit of that, but I don't want to fall into being too comfortable if it feels good. So
this is a race that tends to feed people's addictive personalities. There's a lot of people who are like, I really want to finish this race 5 times, 10 times, 25 times. Is there any of that, like, ooh, I just want to keep coming back and seeing how much incrementally better I can do at this race? Yeah.
After last year's finish, I was really looking forward to coming back this year. I tend to not repeat a lot of races. I really like running in new places, especially hundreds. There's not you can't, I feel like you can't really do too many hundreds in a year, and so there's so many awesome courses that I'd like to branch out, but I'm not going to make any calls until after this race happens. So yeah, one race at a time.
Well, great. Well, yeah, I think a lot of people are really interested to see how you do this weekend, and I know I personally will be keeping my eye on you. And,
Thank you.
Yeah, you were in my iRunFar prediction contest, top 8 women, so my eyes on you too.
Might as well. No pressure.
Okay.
No pressure.
It's okay.
Anyway, a round of applause for Caitlin Gerben. Good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
And yeah, take care of yourself. All the best. And I think we'll be back shortly with Stephanie Violet.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you. It
Let
was
you
fun.
out here.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do.
Oh, she's here.
Oh, there she is.
Hi. She just,
She's getting her cappuccino.
yeah, I was going to say she had to have a drink.
Yeah. Steph.
Oh, yeah, bring it up.
I've been talking too much. I haven't had a chance to drink it. Hello. It's so good.
So good to see you. Yeah.
I'm so excited to be back.
I love them. Do you? I love them.
They are perfect life. Yeah.
Job security for us. You know, buying more face shirts. Yeah.
Well, it's like I can wait. Not have to worry.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm happy to be here. So,
When did you get in last night?
last night, yeah. Yeah, I was up with Megan for a couple of days. The dual
A little team photo shoot?
No, Nathan. I just
That's so cool.
yeah, it's not cool to do that
Yeah.
race day or race week,
Yeah.
but yeah.
All right, so is anybody racing the uphill challenge tomorrow?
No way.
It's really fun.
Me neither. Yeah, me neither.
I mean, I don't want you and who else in the room is racing on Saturday? No uphill challenges. Although Michael Wardian did that one year where he raced the uphill challenge
Of
on
course he did.
Friday.
Yeah.
He raced 100 miles and he finished in 18 hours and something.
He was by
and
yeah.
then the next day he
raced
ran the
a
mile.
mile on a track in six. It was like under 6:30. It was ridiculous. And
Maniac.
his stride over the mile just gradually opened up, and he hardly looked like he'd run 100 miles. So
Maniac. Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
With like 4 hours in between, I think.
that's right.
I think that was
He did a
us.
marathon too, didn't he?
Got some interesting physiology.
Yeah.
I'm envious.
No, because then you're entitled to that, right?
That's
Like,
true.
Gotta keep running. Never put your feet up on
It's
the couch.
really nice to rest
Yeah.
after running.
I feel like someday I would like to take a photo of Michael Wardian with his feet on a couch just relaxing. Like that has probably never been documented
Probably
before.
not.
How does that guy have time for anything? We're gonna wait just a minute or two. Until,
Okay.
oh, unless you want to get started. Yeah.
So if you
Drink more coffee.
spy under the table, Stephanie's got our brand new iRunFar Dry Max socks on.
They're really nice.
We literally just got them in the mail yesterday. Basically, when the Hayden Hawks sock was released from Dry Max, we loved that sock because it's got like the hot weather top to it, but it's got some cushioning on the bottom, which is really nice for ultra distance running, especially if you're not planning on having super wet feet. And so, yeah, we said Dry Max, we want the iRunFar sock to look like that. So, yeah, I haven't had one on my own feet yet, but Stephanie's got it.
They're nice. It's a good purchase.
Shall we?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, welcome back everyone. Of course, again, iRunFar Live here at the Coffeebar in Squaw. I'm here with Megan Hicks and the one and only Stephanie Howe Violet. Stephanie is, of course, a 3-time finisher of this race and the 2014 champion of Western States 100. She's our first former champion who we're speaking with. So my first question for those of us who will never win this race, what's it like to be the Western States champ? And looking back, what do you remember from that day, and like what has it meant to you to be the champion?
Well, that win meant a lot to me. It was my first 100-mile race, and the Western States in general just means a lot to me, so it was kind of like double. Like I have a hard time putting it into words what that meant to me, but coming through on the track, I felt like I was floating. It was literally one of the coolest things I've ever done. Leading up to the track, I don't remember that much. Honestly, it's kind of a blur. I know there were some high points, some low points, kind of getting through Green Gate and not knowing what my body was going to do the last 20 miles. It was a lot of surreal, like what am I doing? But really cool. And coming back, it's just been, I haven't quite performed that well, but it's still, every finish almost means that much to me. I love this race.
Yeah.
I loved seeing how, last year's race obviously wasn't your dream race.
Yeah.
But I loved seeing the emotion and just that emotional component of, it was just so obvious on you at the finish line in several different points on the course. Can you? Yeah, even when you don't have your best race, it seems like there's a lot of emotional, positive energy in there.
There is. I'm almost more proud of last year than I was of the year I finished, or the year I won. I just think I don't quit. And so I knew, there was no way I was going to quit. It was just a matter of working through it. And it got really hard, but the feeling is still the same when you cross the finish line. And I think that's something that's been important to me, is to know when I get into a situation where things are totally falling apart, just to not give up. That's been kind of my motto to get me through these races, and it's really meaningful, really emotional.
So kind of in the same vein, after you won, you got third the next year in 2015. Yep. Then you had an injury which kept you out for a year or more, if my memory is accurate there. And since then, in hundreds, you've kind of had a little bit of adversity.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Well, just as an outside observer, obviously you have the potential to win any race that you're in. And the last couple hundreds have been, I think, a little bit challenging for you. Is there anything, is it just bad luck, or was it a return from injury and just gaining strength again? Or is there something specific that you might attribute it to that you've been working on?
I think it's a combo. I think I had a little bad luck, but also I wasn't super confident. So coming back, I was, I just didn't trust my body. I didn't trust my instincts with fueling and pacing, and so I was just not quite a confident runner again. And so I think last year I did have a lot of trouble with the hundreds, and there's a bit of a learning curve. I feel like I got back into it and realized things like, I'm embarrassed to admit this because I know a lot. I do nutrition, but I made some nutrition errors in both my hundreds. So I was just relearning that, oh my gosh, you gotta rethink this. You're starting not from zero, but I had been so comfortable with knowing what to do that when I finally got back into racing, I had to remember those things again. So I think I have now. I've been really thinking about it. And then another thing that I think really impacted me last year was the year of injury. I cross-trained as much as I could, and I used up a lot of mental energy getting through that. So when I got to the start line of Western States last year, I was pretty burned out mentally because I'd just been fighting for so long. And I think, hindsight, I don't know what I would have done differently, but it was pretty tough to get there and just feel like I had already given so much.
To even be healthy.
So
this year you feel like more yourself and more energetic.
I do. I'm psyched. Yeah. From a training standpoint, it's a lot easier when you're not injured, to be able to just go through the motions and enjoy it. Yeah.
I want to ask ask you about that nutrition part, because you are a nutritionist, and the nutrition is like one of the hardest nuts to crack.
Yeah.
Running ultras in general, let alone running the 100-mile distance. What have you learned and relearned? Yeah, like there's got to be like an awesome knowledge drop right there.
Yeah, I've learned that even if you think you have your system down, it changes depending on the heat, depending on the time of year. So I think everyone has like a range they fall into, and it's not a simple equation. So that's one thing I had to remember, like, okay, even though this formula worked in this race it might be slightly different. So having that ability to adapt. And then also, this is my big takeaway from last year. I got so confident in my fueling. I'm like, I know how to do it. I know how to take gels. And so when I would train, I would go out with like peanut butter and jelly sandwich and like, real food, because it tastes better. Who wants to eat a gel? But then I got into the races and I was like, oh my gosh, my body's rejecting these things. Like I couldn't eat blocks, I couldn't eat gels. And so I realized like, oh yeah, you need to practice with race food. So that was a good reminder to me that, you want to use some of your long runs to mimic what you want to do in a race, because otherwise it's like, it doesn't work.
So in terms of Western States on Saturday, knowing or like relearning that fact that we all have these ranges of what's acceptable, and the conditions for keeping your stomach going are really like not ideal here in Western States.
Yeah.
What have you like given yourself a plan A and then a plan B, or
sort of, yeah, it's plan A. And for me, the thing that helps me fuel the most is to stay cool. And so that's kind of like, that goes along with my nutrition plan. I've been really bad in the past, just telling my crew, I don't want ice, I don't want water, because I just don't want water on me. And it's so weird. So this year I'm like, if I fight it, just do it. Just do it. I'm saying this out loud, so yeah. It's more for me to know. Stephanie, listen. So I think
them dose you.
Yeah, I think that's going to help me. But then I also know that, I have a plan based on the heat, but as it gets warmer, that plan is going to be adaptable. So I'm going to gravitate more towards liquids later in the day when I can't get gels down. And so my crew knows also, I have some options, but I don't have like 20 options. Because I've done that before too, and then I come in and they've got like, do you want this? I'm like, too many decisions. So keep it simple. That's one of my themes, and I have 3 choices.
Okay.
Take one.
So transitioning to your preparation for this year's race, you've done the Formidable 50K, which you won down in Auburn, kind of course specific. You did another race, a North Face race in Peru, I think it was. You won that race too. How do you feel generally coming into the race? Like, how has your training been, and how did you kind of use those races to prepare for this?
So being totally honest, Formidable was awesome. That was a really good, last year I didn't have the best race results. So Formidable was a good confidence booster. Like, okay, I feel great. 50Ks are tough for me, but I felt like I nailed it. So that was really great. And then I went to Peru for a North Face race, and
I think that was hard, huh?
Yeah, that's like a nice way to put it. It destroyed me. It was super hot. It started at 2 in the morning. It took me 13 hours to do an 80K, and so that was kind of unexpected. There was 10 finishers, so it crushed me in maybe not the best of ways. It showed me that I'm tough and I suffer, but I had to take a lot more recovery after that race. So I missed Lake Sonoma this year, which was a big bummer for me. That's one of my favorite races. But
for the wine or for the running? Let's be honest.
Both. And just for the whole scene there, like seeing everyone. But hindsight, that might have been good because it gave me some time to like recover and then have like a gradual buildup. So it's been a little bit non-traditional training leading into Western States, but I feel good about it in a weird way. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think Dylan and I have a couple specific questions about your training. First of all, you put at least most of it on Strava, so it's publicly available that people can see what somebody like you does for your training. Your training included a lot of running, but also a lot of biking in the lead up. Can you talk about that strategy?
Yeah, so I come from a more multi-sport background, so I enjoy doing those activities. To me, it's not like forced cross-training. And we have these windows in Bend in the fall and in the spring where the gravel riding is spectacular. So that was kind of one of my favorite things to do, was to take my gravel bike out and just explore. So that was part of it. The second part was I had a little bit of Achilles tendonitis in both sides, and so that was a way for me to kind of run but then let it heal. So that was part of it. And then I just do better with less miles, honestly. Like, I've learned this over the years that if I add in some cross training, I generally feel like I recover better and my body responds. So
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Another specific question as it pertains to your training. I noticed that you went out to Colorado Springs a few weeks ago to train with our mutual coach, Jason Koop. What was the thought behind that trip? Was it a specific kind of training camp, and what did you guys look to accomplish there?
Yeah, so it was great. It was a really hard training camp for me. So a couple things, the heat, and it was only 95 degrees, but it crippled me. So that was really good. And then the altitude, and then just getting on some tough trails. So it was honestly my hardest week of training, and not so much I was like putting in all these miles, but it was awesome.
So, but what was the thought behind it? Did Jason like reach out and say, hey, I want you to come and train here, or vice versa? Or what was the thought behind like getting together for a camp like that?
So it was kind of twofold. We had been talking quite a bit about, just training, and then also I came there to see, he had a PT there that I saw, and just long story short, I've had, like I said, I had Achilles tendonitis, and trying to figure out the underlying cause of that, which, just to share this, because I think it's fascinating, because I've seen a few PTs, but it seems like it's related to my vestibular,
what the
balance.
hell is that?
So it's like your inner ear and like your balance. So it was really crazy. I get super car sick and I get nauseous at night when I'm running, and that's been my problem like with UTMB. Remember, I saw you early on, and it was night, and I'm like, I'm nauseous already. So at night with the lights, I just get really sick.
Whoa.
And so she was like asking me all these questions, so we put two and two together because I can't balance on one foot, and she's like, you need to work in your vestibular control. So it was great for a number of reasons, and this is just good for anyone to know, because I don't think this is common knowledge that can happen, but it's easy to retrain.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, isn't it? It's crazy. That was not what I was expecting.
Well, yeah, I want to look into that now. But maybe just last question in terms of strategy for Saturday.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about the race? Do you anticipate, going out conservatively because it's going to be quite warm in the afternoon? Or are you just going to kind of run your race by feel? Are you going to be keying off anybody in particular?
I'm definitely not keying off anyone. I'm going to run my race. I kind of think back to my first year, because I think I ran it the best, and I was terrified of the distance. And so the first 10 miles, I was really far back, and I was just like warming up, and it worked out really well later in the day. So I think the past couple years, I felt a little more pressure just on myself, and this year I feel more removed from it. Maybe I'm just more mature about it, but I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm not as much in the spotlight. So I feel like this, like, okay, just do your thing. So I'm definitely not. You won't see me up the escarpment first. You probably won't see me getting into Robinson Flat near the front. I'm going to do my thing, take care of myself. I think staying cool is going to be more important for me to be able to run later in the day. So that's my strategy so far. And my crew is going to ice and douse me.
So if you see Stephanie Violet not like wetted down, throw some water at her.
Yeah, call me out.
Taking all water.
Yes.
Well, we're so excited for you. I know I'm very excited to watch the women's race in general. I think it's going to be very, very interesting, very open, and it's great to have you here as a past champion, and good luck getting a second Cougar trophy this Saturday.
My Cougar's lonely. Yeah. It needs a friend.
I wish we could all say the same. That's a good problem to have. Round of applause, please, for Stephanie.
Thank you.
And next up, we have the race director of the Western States 100-mile endurance run, Mr. Craig Thornley. We'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm happy you're healthy.
Yeah,
I didn't know you were having a cold.
so different than I had before. It's just like, just tendinitis, and I don't mean like just, but it's frustrating, right? Because like time off doesn't help it. So it's been sore, but it's okay. You know, everyone has their thing. It's my thing.
That's your Achilles.
It's my Achilles heel. Yeah, but yeah,
inappropriate,
the vestibular stuff has been crazy. I just had no idea.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Well,
your day isn't too crazy.
it's good.
All right. Trail running today, anybody? Anybody gonna go for a trail run today? No? Off day. Okay. Come on up, Craig.
The boss.
The boss.
I kind of still need to leave my phone in here, so I don't know what's going to happen. So I hate to do that.
That'd be really great if you have to take an important phone call during the
During
interview.
it, yeah.
Tis the Thursday before Western States.
What?
Tis the Thursday before
It
Western
is the
States.
Thursday, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows what's going to go off here, but it's on vibrate, so.
You want to do this one?
Sure. All right, we are here at the Coffeebar in Olympic Valley. We are with race director Craig Thornley. Your hosts are Dylan Bowman and myself, Megan Hicks. This is part of the iRunFar Live at Western States 3-show set. If you are here at Olympic Valley, we're back live at 4 p.m. today for another 5 interviews. If you're with us online, join us at 4 p.m. Pacific time. We also have a store you can buy stuff from, iRunFar.com/store, or back there. We've got a couple sponsors to thank really quick. We want to thank DryMax, Buff, Jaybird, and of course the Coffeebar for hosting us today. Let's do this interview. We are with the master himself, Craig Thornley. Hi.
Hello, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm pretty good.
Have you slept in a few days?
Yeah, I slept a bit last night. Yeah.
You better bank those hours while you can.
Yeah, it's easier than last year so far.
I want to ask you, this 15-minute interview could be 5 hours, but you have a really interesting story about how you encountered the Western States for the first time. We actually published it on iRunFar, but it's several thousand articles back, so I want to bring that story alive.
Okay.
How did you meet the Western States?
I met Western States in 1978.
That was the second year, wasn't it?
78 or 79. My stepdad and mother moved us to Auburn Lake Trails. We were about 1.5 miles from the aid station there, and my brother and I are camping right in the middle of the trail near Hoboken Creek. If it's between Green Gate and ALT, and we see this runner come by and very dirty, very tired, and wanted to know where the aid station was, and we said, I don't know what you're talking about. And then another one came by, and another one came by, and we realized, holy cow, we're at mile 83 or so of this 100-mile race. And I remember distinctly looking at their eyes, other than the fact they were really dirty, but what the blank stare, and I said, man, I want to experience whatever they're experiencing right now. Oh, absolutely. My brother too. I don't know what that is, but I want it at some. And I was young, but yeah, that's how we found out about the trail.
That's great. And you've finished, what, 9 times now?
9 times, yeah.
Great. And including last year, you were able to run and finish your own race. I was curious how that experience was as the race director. Did the perspective of being a runner in your own race lead you to maybe think about changing anything in particular? Or did you notice anything while you were running that you then wanted to implement in this year's race?
Yeah, there's no way the race director could go to every aid station unless we had a helicopter.
Right.
So I got to see every aid station, and I saw some things that I wanted to improve on. But I think what I was struck with was I ran significantly slower than I had in my previous 8. So I got to see the aid stations at the end, and I was amazed that the volunteers were still incredibly enthusiastic, even though I was 50 minutes from the cutoff.
Yeah.
So I don't know, how do you improve that? It was an incredible perspective. And the 99-mile party, I live right near there.
Yep.
It was way better than midnight or 1 in the morning, I'll tell you that. Everybody's awake, they've already been drunk and they're hungover, they've already sobered up. And
it is one of the most incredible things. What Craig's referring to is Roby Point and what they call the golden hour, the last hour before the 30-hour cutoff. Just being on the road there between Roby Point and the finish line, it's an incredible experience. So
it is. It's worth it. If you're going to finish in 28-something, just slow down a little bit. Be a golden hour finisher. I love it. Yeah.
Best hour, right?
It is the best hour in ultra running. You know, Hard Rock's last hour is pretty special too.
They both are golden hours, right? Yeah. You became the race director of Western States in 2012, is that right?
I think I was assistant in 2012, and then 2013 was my first.
Is where you took over.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is number 6, yeah.
Before that, I mean, your relationship with the race started the year I was born.
Yeah, okay.
So you had a long relationship with the race. You ran it 8 times. I think you were involved with like pacing, crewing, maybe volunteering when you weren't running. Talk about Western States circa 1980s, 1990s.
Yeah, we started working at Dusty Corners because my mom knew the aid station captains there. So I would work, I was just a day volunteer, which was super fun. I didn't have any responsibility. I just showed up. And my brother and I were runners, so they let us do, if someone was cramping, we were the experts somehow. So, and we paced and crewed over the years, and and then I finally ran in 2001.
Okay.
My first year.
And then I guess you just kind of went at it. You racked up a bunch of 8 finishes by 2012.
Yeah, it was close. I had actually, before I took the job, I had trained 10 times. So I would have been finished with AJW.
Yeah.
But in 2006, I got hurt 21 days before the race. Couldn't start. And then in 2008, the fires. So that's why I'm scrambling to get my last 2 as race director. If I wait until after I retire, my wife keeps reminding me, you're going to be a lot older. And you barely made it last year. So.
But in fairness, like racing and directing the same race has to be almost an impossible ask. Like to be able to put in enough miles in the months leading up to this race when you're organizing?
I really thought I could run 22 or 23 hours.
Okay.
But the race week didn't go as planned because of all the snow and the trail conditions.
Okay.
With the high country, having been put to bed, all the American River Conservancy purchased 10,000 acres of land. And it's now in wilderness, some of it. Well, they had pulled out all the culverts and got rid of all the roads to return it to natural watershed. And it was put to bed right before the winter snows, and we hadn't seen it until Tuesday before race week. So there was no trail.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's right.
It melted on Tuesday. So I ran from here
to
to Line Ridge on Tuesday. It took me 4 hours.
To get through the snow and...
and find the trail. There was nothing. It was just mud. So we scrambled to get teams out there to scratch it in, and so that week was terrible.
You were tired at the start of the
I was so exhausted starting the race, and I did have a 1-hour night's sleep on, I think it was Thursday night. So.
Well, speaking of other adversity as a race director, I'm curious if there's one thing you can point to that would seem like a small detail to an outside observer or a runner in the race that takes you and your team like an inordinate amount of time or an inordinate amount of stress to prepare.
Well, I could give you a couple names of people, but I probably shouldn't do that. I think you could guess. Yeah, it's dealing with some challenging personalities, and sometimes they derail you, and they take a significant amount of emotional energy and time, and when they show up at my door and an hour and a half later, I just lost an hour and a half of work. It's probably those types of, and we had one yesterday. If you were paying attention to.
I didn't see it.
Okay, well, good. Okay, well, there was one yesterday we had to resolve, and it took it took time. So.
Well, I'm sure it's a difficult position to be in, and I think one of the things that people really admire about you and that you've brought to the race is just radical transparency and how all the decisions are made. Can you talk about the transparency component and like how that's become kind of your philosophy and how valuable it is?
I was a runner of Western States. Right? I never intended to be the race director. I had a career in computer science. I have a couple degrees in computer science. I never thought I was going to be a race director.
I would just like to talk to computers all day, right?
So yeah, and so I came at it from someone who was in the lottery, and I didn't like what I saw.
Yeah.
So when I got the job, like that was the first thing I was going to do.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be transparent, and that forces us to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not transparent, you can kind of like, oh, this guy got in this way, or this woman got in that way. But when you're transparent, you can't critique us for doing anything.
It's all out there.
It's all out there. I mean, we can make mistakes, obviously, but we spend a lot of time to make sure we don't make any mistakes. So.
I think the Western States 100 is, like rightfully said to be the grandfather of American trail ultra running, and there are a lot of eyes also from outside of America looking at this race as a leadership race, as a race with a really good storyline. But being in the leadership position, we all know can be a blessing and a curse because you receive the great stuff from the community, but you also have to make hard decisions, or
absolutely,
following the moral or ethical line is difficult. You guys are a group. You're a board. You're a group of people who make these decisions together. That doesn't necessarily make them easier, but like, what's sort of like, take me in your head for a minute. Like, what do you think about as you're making these sort of hard decisions that will have little ripples throughout the world community?
Well, I think I always want to do what's best for the event and best for the runners and runner experience. If that ever slips from the priority, then I think we're going the wrong way, right? So I'm always thinking about that. And there's plenty of examples where runner experience wasn't at the forefront of decisions at other races, right? And I think that's a huge mistake myself.
Well, you tweeted yesterday something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, but at the end of the day, your job is just to give people the best experience that you can from Squaw to Auburn. And that's it. Kind of voiced your gratitude that is your job, and I think that's so incredibly cool. So your phone luckily has not rung.
It hasn't. I got a text here, but it's just Monkey Boy.
So maybe one more question just to close it out. Just what does your day look like on Saturday, or what does your whole weekend look like?
The day is changing. The day's plans are changing this morning. I was going to go to Lion Ridge, Red Star, Dusty Corners, and then the finish line. But now it looks like I'm going to go to the finish line right away, which, the net control.
Okay.
Because our Ted Knutson, the ultralive.net guy, is running the race this year, so I got to fill in for him.
Somebody's got to be the...
Yeah. And then, I'll be at the finish line for the first finisher, and I'll stay there till 5 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. until I get a couple hours of sleep. And I would love to stay there the whole time, from 7 p.m. to 11, but it's pretty hard to stay awake that long. And then I'll be back for the golden hour and then the awards. So, but most of it, it's really just press and go on Monday or on Saturday. Just press go, and all the infrastructure hopefully works, and we've got decision-making trees in place, and everybody's practiced and drilled. So it shouldn't be too hard for me.
Great.
Shouldn't be.
I hope not. Well, thank you so much for taking a short bit of time out for us. And I think you're a widely respected and admired race director on the circuit, and thanks for everything you do for the sport. And I think we're all rooting for you this weekend.
All right,
so
thank you guys. I love this new edition here, and obviously the coverage of that you guys do on race day, not just on our race, but all the races over the world is cool. I actually admit to looking at Twitter instead of my Ultra Live on race day, I will probably be following your Twitter.
Yeah.
Ultra Live is awesome for following the
If you
entire
want
pack
to,
and tracking your runner. If you
But
want to know what's happening at the head
what's
of the race
happening at
right this second.
So I love you, Ted, but
No, we
until he
also
makes
love you, Ted.
an app for Android, he's got an app for iOS, but.
Round of applause
Yeah.
for the race director,
Right.
Mr. Craig Gorman.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Last interview coming up with
Have a good day,
Tim
okay.
Frericks in just a minute. Yeah, thanks for coming by. Good luck, man. Get some sleep, huh? Or like 5 coffees or whatever.
Hey Craig, how are you? Good to see you. Yeah. Happy to be here. How's it going, man? Good to see you. Yeah.
Have a seat. Okay. We're going to jump right into it.
Sounds good.
Mr. Frericks.
How are you? It's good to see you.
Oh, good. Shake your head.
Yeah.
Come on, I'm a hugger.
Good to see you.
You're here.
I
You're
am.
healthy. You're fit.
Yeah.
I can't wait to ask you questions about this.
Yeah, no, it's, I'm happier to be here. A couple months ago I didn't think like this would happen, so it's been really good to finally get some good training in and be out here and ready to race 100 miles. So,
100 miles.
Yeah.
It's an intimidating proposition.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
First 100 mile, first Western States. I think,
Blow your mind, dude.
I think I'm as ready as I can be, so.
All right, should
All
we
right.
launch into this?
Let's launch. Okay, we're back here. iRunFar live from the Coffeebar. Thursday before Western States 2018. We're joined by none other than Timothy Frericks from Flagstaff, Arizona. Tim, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
It's strange, for me as kind of like an observer of the sport. You're sort of flying under the radar coming into the race. It kind of boggles my mind. I think in a race that has, the likes of your friend Jim Walmsley and Francois Dane, who's one of the greatest of all time, it lends to other people being able to fly under the radar. Of course, you had one of the most incredible seasons last year, winning both Transwilcania and the North Face 50-mile championship at the end of the year, 2 world-class events with international fields. How did your kind of meteoric rise in the sport, and especially your success in 2017, how does that helped you come into this race, and does it give you confidence going into the race?
Yeah, I think it does. So I've seen success at 50 miles, and I really like that distance, and I think that distance is a good distance to just acquaint you with ultra running in general. But it's definitely not 100 miles. 100 miles is a different beast. I think talking with Jim and talking with Jared and guys that have done it before. But yeah, it definitely gives me confidence. I know I've been able to do it over the shorter distances. I think just going into this with a kind of a little bit of a cautious approach, but kind of ready to get after it, knowing that I've put in the training, does give me confidence for race day. But yeah, there is an element of first time going in. But I think other guys have had success their first time, and ready to kind of get after it and give it my best shot.
Let's talk about that concept of stepping up to the 100-mile distance for a minute, because there are people watching right now in this room and online who are on the cusp of their own first 100-mile races. You're doubling distance.
For sure. Yeah,
What's
for sure.
that what is that process like in your head of trying to wrap your head around it?
I think what kind of gives me peace of mind is just looking at the little things, making sure my crews are dialed, and taking care of things from a nutrition standpoint. But yeah, and doubling the distance of what I've been competitive in is intimidating, but at the same time, I'm somebody that I like a new challenge, and But yeah, I like a new challenge, and I think going into it with that mindset of I'm gonna challenge myself, I'm gonna push myself with something new and something longer, has me really excited, to be honest.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I honestly think the whole first 100-mile thing is a little bit overrated too, so I don't think we need to worry too much. But I saw you this spring at Lake Sonoma 50. You were there supporting your friends, and of course everybody in your little training group got into the race, which was incredible to watch. But you were hurt at that point.
Right.
Can you tell us what you were dealing with and how your recovery's been, how your training's been since then?
Yeah, I think if I can trace it back to one thing, I fell in the Grand Canyon on a training run by myself. Yeah, kind of on like a more remote route, and ended up having to like hike out, kind of hobble out. And from that point forward, I ended up favoring my other leg and started having some IT band issues in my left leg. And so that just, it's nothing like a lot of people get stress fractures and bone issues, but for me, it's always been like ligaments and tendons that have bothered me. And I think just, for whatever reason, it was like just knee pain, IT band, kind of classic runner's knee IT band syndrome. And probably kept jogging on it a little more than I should have. I kept trying to test the waters, and I think that kind of probably prolonged things. But I don't know, right after I saw you guys at Lake Sonoma, like things started clicking again. I had a lot of great people in my corner and Flagstaff to work with me. Wes Gregg at Hypo 2 really got me healthy, I think, and Tommy Pusey was working on me a bunch too. So between those guys, like really was able to start clicking again after Lake Sonoma. So it's been a short block, but I kind of like to go into things a little undertrained, rather than the other direction. In college, I dabbled in the overtraining category a lot, so I think staying away from that is to my advantage.
It's probably hard to do when you're training with the group of guys that you are.
Yeah, it is.
A few people in Flagstaff have told me that you are arriving to appropriate fitness at just the right time.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, is that... Talk about what's happened since you were able to start running, and where do you think you are?
If I look back at my training logs, like I've seen, I don't know, like before Black Canyon, the race that got me into Western States, I was probably in the shape of my life like in January, and I'm thinking back like, man,
it's true. Like after TNF, I'm always so fit.
Yeah, it was just
50.
For sure. It was like, man, December, January went really well, and I remember really nailing the run in the Grand Canyon in January and just being like, I've got a long way to go until Black Canyon in the middle of February. So I do think I've had kind of, if you look at everything, like an 8-week block here, and that's worked well for me in the past. I would prefer like a couple more weeks, but I've been really fit off of like a 2-month block in the past, and I think I'm kind of getting into shape like right at the right time. And it's kind of hard to say too, because we've done so much heat training, and it's like when you're running in the heat in the Grand Canyon for your big days, it's like you kind of just feel like garbage no matter what. And so it's like, and so it's like kind of been that I've kind of had to keep a level head with that, just knowing that like it's not going to be the same when you're running in 105 degrees in the Grand Canyon. But I think things are rounding into shape at the right time.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, as I sort of said, you're sort of flying under the radar, but astute observers like myself think you have probably a legitimate chance to win the race, even though it's your first 100-miler. But based on your performances in the past, you're also going to be racing against a lot of world-class guys. Obviously, your good friend Jim Walmsley, who has had sort of transcended the sport in the last couple of years. Francois Dane, who's one of the best in the world. They both sort of like to put pressure on the field early in the race.
For sure.
It seems you also like to race fairly aggressively. How do you think about your strategy leading into the race? Do you think you might go with the front pack, or are you going to try and be conservative, being that it's your first time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say for sure. Like, I always have like a rough game plan, and then like I try and roll with the punches on race day. I think a lot of guys go into it with that mentality, but I do think for this race, like, I'm going to err on the side of caution. Yeah, I mean, just erring on the side of caution, but I still do want to put myself out there. Like, I don't ever really want to go into a race like just having myself beat already before lining up. So I think giving myself a shot while being cautious is kind of going to try and be my approach. You're not going to see me leading the race in the first like 10, 20 miles. There's just no way. There's no way. I do like to be aggressive, but not. I mean, I don't think I think this place, you have to respect 100 miles. You have to respect the course and the heat, and yeah, being cautious, I think, plays to everyone's favor.
So does that mean you're gonna want to like know the guys in the front are a couple minutes ahead? Do you want to keep sight of them? Are you going to be running by feel?
I think a lot of it for me is going to be running on feel.
Okay.
I think comparing yourself to the field is always like a useful tool. You know, I know the guys that are running, and I know a lot of them are in really good shape right now. I mean, I train with Jim every week, so I know where those guys are coming from, and so like I think I will use those guys as a bit of a gauge, but at the same time, for me, so much of ultra running is just like monitoring yourself and kind of paying attention to your internal cues. And I think, though I haven't raced one yet, I think that's even more important at 100 miles where the distance is so long. So mostly internal stuff.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah.
Let's talk for a second about that heat. I think that's one of the big factors that it's going to influence how this race plays out. You've experienced some pretty incredible heat in the canyon, pretty much like what you're going to see in the canyons of Western states. How's heat going? How are you in heat?
I think I'm like average. You know, I'm not. Cody Reed will joke about Jim Walmsley. Like, Jim is a camel. He's had some of his best, like, just objective, like, splits in the canyon. Like, he's run some of his best times when it's like 100 degrees out.
Right?
It's just
he grew up in Phoenix.
Yeah,
it's just not
like,
fair.
Yeah,
it's
just
fair.
like
he's made for this race.
Different body thermometer.
Yeah, but I think even guys like Jim are prone to overheating. So I think I'm pretty. I call myself average, but I do think like I grew up in the desert, not as hot as where Jim grew up, but it'd be 110 in the summers. And so I do have experience in the heat, and training in the heat. This block honestly has gone. I've had better runs in the heat than I ever have had for myself. So yeah, I'm excited. I think it's just another layer of like, well, let's just put our heads down and like get through it. So yeah.
Cool. And I mean, we've already touched a bit about like the community you guys have in Flagstaff and your whole Coconino Cowboy thing. Maybe just like tell us a little bit about your guys' group and how you think it helps all you guys. And how often do you guys train together? Anything specific you can share in that context? Yeah,
I think more than anything, like we're just a group of friends that like to train together is kind of the bottom line. And that has been, it's been super useful when it was like just Jim and I and then Cody. It's just been useful to have like Jim was a year into it when I came in, and or maybe a little more, and just having guys around you to bounce ideas off of, and we're all self-coached, and so I think just having that as kind of like a gauge of like, oh, Cody ran, he went out and won way too cool, or Jim went out and won Lake Sonoma, like what were those guys doing when they did that? And like, so I think it's just a useful tool to be able to kind of compare, but it's also like we've been able to hold each other accountable. Like I know when I get really deep in the trenches of like working a lot and running by myself a lot, it's a lot easier to like let training kind of slide, and like so just being held accountable by my friends and having people to join up for a run at like Eric Sensman's run with me at like 9 p.m. before after a 13 hour shift, and so it's just like stuff like that. It's just
super valuable.
Yeah. It's been awesome.
You mentioned both Jim and Cody, and obviously Jim and Jared are both sort of known as being high volume trainers. I talked to Cody last night, and we were talking about how he's more of a low volume guy. How is it? Do you feel pressure when you're training with guys who are doing 150, 170 mile weeks?
Yeah.
And does that influence your training at all?
Absolutely. I think like it's when you're training with guys that put in that much volume, you kind of question your own methods. You're like, man, maybe I'm not doing enough. But I kind of like where I'm at with like my work-life balance, and just being kind of self-limited with work has kept me from overtraining. In college, I would routinely do bigger miles, not the kind of miles they're doing now, but back-to-back weeks for months at a time, and ended up just kind of overtrained. And so I think just paying attention to what works for me, and in being like, kind of that moderate, not necessarily low volume or high volume, but like 100, 110 miles a week has worked really well for me. but yeah, there is a pressure there. Like, man, am I not doing enough? But I think finding a balance has worked well.
That's smart. Yeah.
I've always wondered in that group, like the accountability thing. Does the accountability ever go in the opposite direction? Like, maybe you better ease off a little bit there?
It does. No, it does. I mean, and yeah, at least for me, it's like, you know, I'll like give the guys my schedule or whatever, and we're talking about things, and I'll kind of ease off of things. But yeah, it should probably work that way a little more than it does.
Let's go have a Dairy Queen instead of a second run, maybe?
Yeah. They're like, this lazy guy's only doing 110 this week? Come on.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Tim, thanks so much for taking the time to come see us this morning. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of interested people watching your race on Saturday, and a lot of people rooting for you. And yeah, good luck.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Let's give Mr. Ferraris a round of applause.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps our iRunFar Live at Western State's Thursday morning show. We'll be back here at 4 p.m. this afternoon with 5 more interviews. Make sure to have a drink and give your patronage to the coffee bar here. We've also got the iRunFar store back there, iRunFar.com/store if you'd like to shop online. Thank you so much to Drymax, Buff, Jaybird, and of course the coffee bar for hosting us. We'll see you guys at 4 p.m. There's going to be beer.
Good job, man. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Good luck, man. Pressure.